knowing God or experiencing God? Let's talk about it with author Adam Ramsey on Steve Brown, etc.
He's an old white guy, an author, broadcaster, and seminary professor who's sick of religion. And he's brought friends. Please welcome Steve Brown, etc.
And I am the aforementioned old white guy, and we're so glad you're here. As I say often and mean every time I say it, you always have a place at our table. Matthew Porter, our executive producer, is here. Matthew says today is National Be Late for Something Day. Actually, that was Sunday.
You missed it again, Matthew.
Or am I celebrating it in its truest sense?
Our video director, John Myers, is in his tech bunker. John believes we should give more reverence to sacred holidays, like Taco Tuesdays. And our producer, Jinx, is in his little glass booth, and Dr. George Bingham is the president of Key Life.
Don't get us confused.
Jinx says, check one, check two. George says, check one, check two, check three, check four. And praise.
We'll be looking for those donations, Jim.
And praise for more.
Do you know why the sound guy only counts to two? Because he doesn't want to upset the drummer, who can only count to four.
It's so bad. I think we'll leave the jokes to Matthew.
Oh, those were jokes?
Here's the soft feminine side of this program. Kathy says if Jesus turned water into wine, maybe you could also turn these introductions into jokes.
It's right up there with turning water into wine.
Matthew wrote that about himself.
It's true.
I didn't write it.
Jesus intervened so that I would fix it.
There you go. There you go.
Yes.
Our guest, and we've just met him and we like him. We've been talking before the broadcast. He's a little crazy like us. And the difference is he talks funny. His name is Adam Ramsey, and he's he leads Liberty Church on the Gold Coast, Australia, and also serves on the network as the network director for Acts 29 Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. His new book is, and it's a great book, called Truth on Fire, Gazing at God Until Your Heart Sings. Adam, thanks for being with us.
Steve, it is so good to be with you guys. And if this was a Thanksgiving table, I would love to hang out with this group of laughing, bantering, sarcastic. You basically all are almost Australian. So good to be with you.
Listen, your friend Ray Ortland was on with us recently, and he said for us to tell you, be careful in hanging out with us. You can hurt your reputation. Given you don't live in the States, you don't know that. So you are unawares as you join this program. Listen, I have for years made my devotional time sometimes simply thinking about, looking at, praying over, letting it absorb me, the attributes of God. I think with this book, you have absolutely got it. It's fun. It's a good read, and it'll change people's lives. How did this start with you? It wasn't a theology class, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was, for me, it's almost more biography. And so I grew up around churches that were highly experiential, for the feeler types. So it was seeker sensitive. It was about the vibe and the worship. And we all know churches like that. And there's some things that I was really thankful for in that season. and eventually got to a point there where I started to ask, is there more than this? Where, we had the Bible, and the Bible was helpful, but it wasn't really central. And we had the doctrine of grace kind of there, but it was more in the altar call, not really for the entirety of the Christian life. And so I went through my own theological reformation in my late teens, early 20s, and kind of discovered this big theology, this high view of God. And as I discovered this new tribe that kind of came along with it, that are committed to theological accuracy and biblical literacy and all of these things, I realized that in this tribe too, there was this sense of, hey, is there meant to be more than this, of just right thinking, where so frequently I'd have friends, and even myself, we just camp out on having good theology, and we wouldn't let that move us towards the right experience. And I was still asking the question, isn't there meant to be more than this? And I think genuinely one of the great tragedies in our present generation of Christians has been this divorce between theological Christianity and experiential Christianity, when the one is always meant to move us toward the other. And I just believe God wants us to have both.
Yes, he really does. In fact, one of the good things is theologically in our time, in a lot of quarters, those who have been Pentecostal and have wanted something deeper, but loved their heritage and wanted to affirm it, and those who were Reformed, who had the theology they thought right and everybody else was wrong, they've gone dry. And so we found out that maybe the scripture is true, that we need each other, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where this book really is. It's a convergence of those two. I mean, I'm a happy, card-carrying, reformed charismatic, and genuinely believe that gazing at God, that right thinking about God, is meant to move us into deeper experiences with this God. And so the goal of the book is to put God front and center, chapter after chapter after chapter, and look at him in new, fresh, but very old ways. And then to look at not just the attribute, but what is the experience that this attribute, this particular thing about God, is meant to lead me into and deepen in me in my Christian life. So as I gaze, for example, at the transcendence of God, or the fact that God is other, I believe that's meant to lead me into an experience of wonder, where I just go, whoa, he's so big. He's so dissimilar to me in so many ways that when I get my head around that just a little bit, it creates this childlikeness in me that wants to worship him with awe and curiosity, and sees the world through a new lens, and now lives before him differently.
That is so good. I don't want to get too esoteric here, but theologically, I believe you're on very solid ground. In fact, I think your Reformed views incorporate, if we understand it properly, incorporate the experience. And the experience should incorporate the theology. In other words, good doctrine and real experience with God. Was that an experience? Was that a new discovery for you? I mean, as you started looking at God in this way, not just to study him and know about him, did you find yourself in his presence? And did you find that life-changing?
Yes. So for me, it was at two key points of my life. It was realizing that one of these things without the other was missing something radically important for the lived experience of being a Christian in this world. And I realized at one point in my life, it was, having a heart on fire about nonsense or foolishness or a low view of God is a fail. And at another point in my life, I realized that having theological accuracy and having a sharp mind with a cold heart and a cold experience of God was also a fail. And that the same Jesus who said, love the Lord your God with all of your heart, also included in that description, all of your mind, soul, and strength. And so for me, it was understanding that as I look at God, which is what theology is, right? We're just looking at God. Who is he? That's meant to do something in my life. It's not just meant to be, I camp out in correct thinking. It's meant to lead me into deeper experiences, into green pastures, into refreshing waters that come from being in his presence. And I really do believe that we are changed and we have joy well up in our hearts and courage infused into our hearts when we see God rightly. So even for me, writing this book was very much a worship experience, to just gaze at him and turn that gem of what he's like around in my hand, seeing him from different angles. Genuinely, my heart sang all the way through the writing of this book.
Oh, man. I'll tell you, if you're not where Adam is, and you're not drawn to what he's talking about, you need to go back to square one. You're probably not saved. But every Christian I know, even if they don't experience the reality of what we're going to be talking about on this broadcast, wants to deeply and then often. Guys, the name of the book is Truth on Fire, Gazing at God Until Your Heart Sings. We're going to talk more about it when we come back, but this is very hard work. And so we're going to take a nap, have some milk and cookies, and then like Jesus, we're going to return. We're so glad you're here. We're hanging out with Adam Ramsey. You can get him on Twitter by the way, at Adam Ramsey. The Ramsey would be RAMSEY.
Underscore.
With an underscore,
right? Yeah.
That wasn't a
with
typo?
an underscore at the end.
Underscore at the end. That's right. I didn't see that.
I didn't know you could do that.
I'm doing the best I can. Okay. And Adam has written a great book about God. And it's not what you think. It's not a how-to book. It's an experience book with theological gravitas to it. And this is the kind of book that you get and you spend a lot of time in, and would be a great book for a small group study in your church.
Adam, I want to ask you about the sovereignty of God. When I was very young and went to Bible college, I heard about that, the sovereignty of God, for the very first time in my life. And I mean, it was pretty heady, detailed stuff. I mean, we did the Order Salutis, and I mean, it was just, and you had to parrot back all this really heady stuff. And I was confused, and I was really upset and concerned that God would be like that. And for the longest time, I just dismissed that. And there were, it just was not a big deal in my life. And then a lot of years later, when I began, I think, in a small way, to begin to understand the sovereignty of God, I realized that there was a freedom in life that comes from understanding that God really is in charge, et cetera. Do you agree with that?
I so agree with that. I mean, when I encountered
you did.
when I encountered the sovereignty of God, it was like getting a right hook from Mike Tyson, spiritually speaking. It absolutely rocked me, and I actually, man, I think like many of us, I fought against it for a long time and really wrestled through this. The only thing scarier than the sovereignty of God being sovereign, I ended up concluding, was something else or someone else's, which is terrifying. And And we look at who God is, and not just sovereign, but all the other attributes there, that he's good and he is love and he is gracious, he is patient, he is merciful. And we see over and again this wonderful God. We realize, oh, he not only is sovereign, he should be sovereign. And we can actually rest in the fact that he is the one who is sovereign. So I think for us, Kathy, all of us Christians, to some degree or another, are recovering control freaks. We've grown up in a time where we've all been told that we can be whatever we want and do whatever we want, and all the rest of that. But it doesn't take too long in life to realize, hey, we're actually not that in control as we like to think that we are. And then when we gaze at God and we explore the attribute of God's sovereignty, what happens is we realize the experience that is meant to create in our lives is one of assurance. God is God. That is so liberating. That means I don't have to pretend to be anymore. If God is God, if God is sovereign, I can actually just come and rest in that reality, trusting that his sovereignty extends over all the things that happen in this world. And even when I don't see it, and even when it hurts, and even when circumstances just absolutely are the worst, I can rest in the fact that God's got this and he's going to get me there all in the end.
And for pastors, that's a wonderful discovery that begins with bad news and turns out to be good news. The good news, if God is sovereign, that means you're not, and that he doesn't need you. He was doing fine before you came along, and he's going to do fine long after you're gone. So go get a milkshake or a beer or whatever.
Have a nap.
Rest a nap. Yeah, have a nap.
Have a nap.
Look, at the end of the day, God's sovereignty only unsettled me when I realized that to conclude that he was sovereign, or that he was sovereign, and I was not. That only unsettled me to the degree that I thought I could do a better job than him. and when that kind of landed on me, that was really confronting. I can't do a better job at guarding than God can. And at the end of the day, I think the sovereignty of God being on the throne, threatens me or unsettles me to the degree that my flesh wants to be there. And instead, God wants me to come and trust him and rest in him and nap to the glory of God in that sovereignty.
And the wonderful thing about this book and what you say about God is not only is he sovereign, when you finally came to the conclusion that you could be God better than he could be God, he reared back and gave a great big old belly laugh. Because he's God. And you didn't surprise him with anything that you said.
Nope. That's George. Exactly right. and he wants us. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
No, go ahead. Finish your thoughts.
I was going to say, he wants us. I think the Christian life is one of learning and relearning to trust that he is God, that he's got us, and that he's got this. And that sanctification almost boiled down to its smallest form, trusting that God gets to be God. He loves you. It's going to be fine.
Yeah. Adam, from kind of an overview standpoint, you make reference to the communicable and incommunicable attributes of God. Can you kind of give an overview of that? Maybe categorize a couple of them for us?
Yeah. So, George, the incommunicable attributes, those are the parts of God that they are true and specific just to God. So these are things like his otherness or transcendence, the way in which he's dissimilar to us, his sovereignty, his omnipotence, that he is all powerful. We're not. So that means we can embrace weakness, that he is all knowing. We're not. That means we can embrace honesty, that he is omnipresent. We're not. We're limited and finite. And that omnipresence of God, maybe my favorite attribute of God, we can maybe come back to that later. We can embrace, we can experience courage when we understand these things there. So the incommunicable attributes of God give us a sense of his transcendence, his otherness. And that really does kind of make our hearts like sing in awe and wonder and the fear of the Lord. The communicable attributes of God.
Hold it right there. we gotta sell product. So we're gonna come back, and we call that in the industry a teaser. That means if you said, when he said communicable attributes of God, say what? Don't go anywhere, because it's going to be explained. It's going to change your life. And if you turn off your radio or your screen, you will miss it and regret it for the rest of your life. So don't go anywhere. Hey, you're listening to Steve Brown, etc., and we appreciate your being here. But if you're only listening, you're missing out on half the fun, mainly how handsome and good looking I am. I mean, people talk about my voice and they miss that part, and it gets old being a pretty voice all the time. But if you're only listening, make sure you visit youtube.com, Key Life Network, and then click the subscribe button, and you'll be able to sit at our table more comfortably than if you're just listening on the radio. We're hanging out with author Adam Ramsey, and we like him a lot. And just before the break, and I rudely interrupted you, you were going to say something about the communicable attributes of God. What in the world is that?
Well, before I answer that question, I'm sure it's been said, but has there been a Steve Brown audio Bible suggestion yet? Because I would sign up for that if that's not a thing.
Well, I'm not only old, and not only do I have a good voice, I'm dyslexic. And getting through the entire Bible just wouldn't work.
Numbers.
Trust me on that.
All right. There could be some funky theology by the end of it.
Yeah,
That's fair.
right.
That's fair.
New revelation.
So the communicable, we talked about the incommunicable attributes of God, the ways that he's not like us, and that we're not like him. And that gives us a sense of his transcendence. The communicable attributes of God, these are the ways that we are and can be like God and can grow in these things. So things like the mercy of God, the goodness of God, the love of God. We grow in these things and are sanctified in these things through the course of our life. And God is these things and the source of these things perfectly. So the incommunicable give us a sense of his otherness and transcendence. The communicable attributes give us a sense of his immanence, which is just another way of saying his nearness, that he is close, that he can be experienced in ways that we can reflect through the course of our life. And as we understand and look at some of these attributes, for example, take the fact that God is merciful. I know all of us on this call love the mercy of God, that he has been gracious towards us, and it's undeserved all the way down. When we really get our minds around that and swallow that doctrine whole, it shows up in our lives as gentleness. We now extend gentleness toward one another, and we grow in gentleness towards each other through the course of our lives. And so both those together give us a complete picture of who God is: incommunicable, communicable, transcendent, immanent.
Adam, I like the approach of the book where it's not just knowledge, it's not just experience, it's also not just them fused together. It's that this one leads to this one, and that filters all the way down to the titling of the chapters, which is just great. It's like, here's what we will learn about, and here's how it's going to manifest, and it helps paint the picture. But early on, you paint a picture of the hearth and the flame that I think just crystallizes this entire concept. I wonder if you could just kind of give us broad strokes of what that is, because it goes so far in explaining this idea.
Yeah. So if good theology is the hearth, true experience is the flame, and we need both, right? Mm-hmm. So if you have an experience of God that, and you're in a church, or you're the kind of Christian that's more oriented toward being a feeler, and you're very experiential, you're engaged with the emotional side of your Christianity, that's really great. We need to have that, but without the hearth of good theology about who God is and what he's like as he's revealed himself, those experiences can run wild. And many of us have experienced Christianity that has no hearth to it, no scaffolding, and have kind of come away from that as burn victims through the course of our lives, because it's just uncontained beyond the bounds of Scripture. And the flip side is also true. If you're more of a cerebral type, you love theology, you love big fat theological texts, and just digging into the systematic or biblical theology side of Christianity, that's awesome. But if that's all you do, if that doesn't lead you into warmth and experience and nearness with God, then that magnificent theology without the flame is basically just cheapened into a decoration that sits in the background there, and it doesn't warm the life and warm the room and bring the light and heat that it's meant to do. So, and when you have both, though, what you have is Christianity as God intends for us to experience it. Right thinking that leads to right feeling, theology that leads to worship and doxology, and that's what we've been created for.
Mm-hmm. Adam, we're up on a break, so this is a yes/no question. Are you by nature a contemplative?
I am more contemplative, to be sure, and kind of a nerd. So I like to sit in those two things together.
Hey, so you could write another book on being a nerd and a contemplative, and with a head for biblical doctrine and the understanding of the Graf-Wellhausen documentary hypothesis. I'm sure that kind of book would sell millions. Guys, we're gonna back off for a minute, but we're coming back, and we're talking with Adam Ramsey and the book, and it's so good. Truth on Fire, gazing at God until your heart sings and you dance and speak in tongues. Don't go anywhere. Hey, we're so glad you're here. By the way, I've mentioned this before, but you never listened to me. We have a free Key Life app, and John Myers worked on it for months, and it's the best app in the history of the universe. Check it out. As Matthew says, whatever denomination you are, Apple or Android, we have one for you. You can go to the App Store, Google Play, or just visit keylife.org/app.
I haven't gotten it yet. Sorry, John. I'll get that.
What?
I haven't. I'm waiting for some surprise, So with all the similarities between Florida and Australia, it's hot. Everything's trying to kill us. You mentioned something about a python, and we have pythons, so just kind of curious what we should be watching out for up here.
I mean, you guys might have seen the meme that has a photo of the Australian bush, and in that meme it says there are 1,285 creatures in this photo that can kill you, and you can't see anything. That it's just there, and then underneath it says, and there's 800 more who want to but can't. So we like to say around here that the main language we speak in Australia is screaming after English, because there's just everything coming at you. So I tell a story in chapter 4, looking at what's the title of the chapter? God is near. God is never far away. The experience of courage. And I had just driven home from work and was coming up our street, and there across the road was the biggest python I had ever seen in my life. I mean, this thing was just enormous. And so I mean, it spanned almost the entire width of the road. And so I kind of drive around this thing and get up to our house and naturally tell Christina and the kids, like, there's a huge snake. Let's go have a look. And so we all run down the hill and we're standing around just looking at this thing, and it's incredible. And the sun's going down. And as we finish that experience, we start walking back to the house, and my eldest daughter challenges me to a running race. And of course, I'm competitive. And so we start trash talking, and I give her a head start, and she starts running, and the other kids start running, and then I start running. And then, I overtake them. And I mean, there's nothing more pathetic than, a middle-aged white guy running past a group of children and thinking he's killing it. But that was me, right? So here I was crossing the driveway in first place, and I hear this blood-curdling scream from behind me. And so I mean, the kind that just freezes you up. And so I turn around and start to run back. And Eliana, our youngest, she was about 4 or 5 at the time, maybe, is running with eyes wide, just terrified. And she runs toward me and she dives into my arms. And I finally get the story out of her. She didn't know there was a race. And all she did was look up and sees her older siblings running away, and then sees her dad running away. And she thinks to herself, oh no, the snake is coming. So in her mind, she's in last place with a giant snake apparently chasing everyone. And I had to walk her through, no, sweetie. Hey, daddy doesn't run away. Daddy doesn't leave you there. I'm going to run to the snake. You're not going to be in trouble there. And it was a reminder of just presence there, of knowing the nearness of someone stronger than us who cares for us, is what puts courage into our hearts. And God is like that. So it's one of those moments there of getting the Father's heart and his nearness toward us. That's where courage comes from.
Great story. Adam, by the way, just as an aside, you should have run, and Kathy would agree with this, you should have run over the stupid snake, not go around it, man. Every snake you remove from this world is a gift to humankind.
Back and forth. Back up to see if you got it the first time, and then do it again.
Yeah, this one was so big, Kathy, it was going to dent the car. So I just couldn't do that. And we get the spiders so big that we got to kill them with a good basketball chest pass. And the only problem is when they catch it and then throw it back at you. So we got them all.
Well, speaking of,
I know this is
nothing but
like,
net.
This is kind of like asking which of your children is your favorite, but what's your favorite attribute?
I think it's the one I just talked about, the omnipresence of God, that he's never far away. And the reason that's so frequently paired with the command in Scripture, don't be afraid, don't be afraid, don't fear. Why? Because I am with you, because I'm with you, because I'm with you. So not only is God omnipresent, filling every space and not just every where, but every when of the entirety of human existence. Not only has he come near to us through the incarnation of Jesus Christ, not only is he even nearer than that by the sending of the Spirit who indwells us, but we're even tighter. We're in Christ. We're in him. And that is the reality that shapes all the rest of our lived reality. So, and that's the reality that gives us courage when we feel like, man, life's really hard and I'm just going through it at the moment, to know that God is near, we need that more than ever.
Speaking of not needing to be afraid, reminds me of my favorite story in the whole book about basketball. You close the whole book with it. Wondered if you could briefly share that, because it's one of the most amazing illustrations I have ever heard.
Well, the last chapter is God is victorious, and looking at the victorious nature of God, that is a part of who he is, that he wins at the end of the day. And he's given us an inside look to the final page of all of human history. And so we know how the story ends. And so I share the illustration there of we're a Golden State Warriors family. Sorry if that offends anyone. But it's been a couple of years of us winning now, so I feel like we're okay to say that. My wife's from the Bay Area, and it was during the playoffs. I was preaching at church that day. The goal was to go home, watch the game afterwards, and enjoy that moment with the family. And someone at church came up to me and basically spilled the beans, and they realized I hadn't seen it, and that now they just told me that we'd won. Anyways, it totally changed the way that I watched the game later that night. And as I'm sitting there with Christina, and she's biting her nails, and we're down by 10 with a couple of minutes left in the fourth quarter, there was this perfect sense of peace in my heart and hope. Why? Because I know how the story ends. And so it doesn't matter what the score is. If you know how the story ends, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world right now. If you know how the story ends, it changes the way you live out your present page.
Oh, man. Adam, you've been great. This has been a wonderful hour. I just noticed it's the last segment, and I don't know where it went. I hope we can do this again. Even if you do talk funny, you say really, really good things. Adam, thanks for taking time out of a busy schedule to be with us. And I hope
you, Steve.
Our paths cross and we can do this again sometime. God bless you, brother.
Me too. God bless you. Thank you, all of you, for a great conversation.
Hey, guys, we're going to come back and tell you who we're going to do it unto next week, and you're going to be amazed. Absolutely amazed. I think it's the President of the United States, and we'll see. Hey, we just took a vote amongst ourselves, and we decided we like Adam Ramsey. In fact, we've been during the break, and you don't hear any of this, we've been planning some other programs to put him on with some other guests with whom he is close. All we got to do is find a subject and let him loose. Anyway, he fits in. If he were closer, he would be on our staff. You ought to get the book because it's saying something that really needs to be said. We do right brain, left brain stuff in the church, even if we think that's New Age. We got some people who look down their noses at you because your theology is wacko. And some of you others look down your noses at others because God has gone away on vacation and never shows in your life. And so somebody like Adam comes along and writes a book and says those things go together. And they're important, both of them. And until you get both sides of that, as it were, right brain, left brain, you don't have this thing. And this book is a good place to start. Starts with a theological concept of a definition of God called the attributes of God, communicable and not so much. And gazing at God and simply dealing with that is an experience of his presence that can change your life. So get the book, Truth on Fire, Gazing at God Until Your Heart Sings. And I added, you dance and speak in tongues. Now, I'm a Presbyterian. We don't do either one of those and never will, because you can't do either one decently and in order. But this book will move you closer, and you ought to get it. Kathy, who's next week?
Well, interestingly, Ray Ortland, who's our friend, wrote the introduction, or the foreword rather, to Adam Ramsey's book, and Ray's going to be here next week, and he's got an interesting book out, brand new, called "The Death of Porn: Men of Integrity Building a World of Nobility," and I think you're going to be really, really surprised, because it's not what you think.
Go from theology to sex, man. Only on this program are you going to get both. And with the freedom to think about both. You're going to like Ray Ortland. Don't miss it. We'll be here, same time, same place. Hope you will be too. And between now and then, don't do anything we wouldn't. That gives you a wide, wide berth.